So with Compass, you can order a mining machine, have that shipped to your home if you're in the US, and use the at-home mining guide to get set up and mine from home. On the other hand, if you want to use the vetted facilities that have been vetted by the Compass mining team, you can go and select an ASIC machine and have it sent there. They've got the options of new machines as well as second-hand machines, which might be able to go online faster, so there's a trade-off there. Now, go and check out the website. They've got material like a newsletter, they've got podcasts as well, so you can learn about mining. That website is compassmining.io. And now, onto the show with John. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So John, you're working on a lot of things right now, and obviously interested to chat about what you're doing and your new startup, which is out there public now. So do you want to just start off with a little bit of what it is and why you started it?
Sure. So about 2 years ago, almost exactly, I had left Bitrefill and kind of arranged to do this new startup, in stealth mode. And so for the first 3 months, I basically tried to design a vision, I guess you could say. And my goal was basically to prove the Bitcoin thesis, I guess, which is to say, if we actually get hyper-Bitcoinization or, in any version of Bitcoin being the primary storage of value on Earth, what does it actually look like? How does it change the world? And what do we replace the things that it disrupts with? So the three kind of pillars that I'm looking at is, replacing big banks, replacing big government or big regulation, and replacing big tech. And supposedly Bitcoin is going to, affect these things greatly, these major centralized dinosaurs, you hopefully could say. And so I wanted to think about, we always tell shitcoiners, we always tell no coiners, don't do that, do this. But we just say use Bitcoin. We don't say what we're actually going to replace the government with, what we're actually going to replace Twitter with and Facebook, and how we'll actually replace modern finance or contemporary finance. And so I came up with this kind of minimum set of technologies and services that would need to be in place to kind of make sense. And, decided on a few products that we would have to make this kind of minimum viable ecosystem for this post-hyper Bitcoinization society. And so that left us with basically, some typical things that you would expect, like some wallet software, some server software, etc. And also some platforms, the kind of an honest attempt at doing what we might call dApps, locally formed applications, based off of a more decentralized web of information. But we were kind of left with this gap of interactions that didn't really exist yet, and kind of the glue that would make this all actually work. And what I could come up with, the closest thing I could come up with, was basically to have some form of way that two people could look at a digital anchor, or in what we landed on was a pub key, and assign metadata to it in a mutual way. And this would allow people to kind of move the algorithms and the curation and the reputation, all of these kind of walled garden aspects from major entities to the user. And so the kind of more original or risky thing that we're doing as a company is making a protocol called slash tags. And slash tags is basically a way of using key pairs, or the same kind of way that Bitcoin does, basically for everything. And so we don't use a blockchain for this at all, but it basically handles all of what you might hear people say as Web3 use cases, or decentralized web use cases, or self-sovereign web, self-sovereign identity, semantic web, any of these things that are relating to mutual metadata about digital things. We're trying to address those with slash tags. And so, within this set of products, we're trying to basically show how to apply Bitcoin, Lightning, tokens on Lightning, slash tags, and by extension webs of trust, to create this whole concept that we call the atomic economy, which is basically the full vision of realizing post-hyper Bitcoinization in a digital economy.
An ambitious goal, certainly. And I love to see these big ambitious ideas. And as you were saying, this slash tags and slash pay idea is a very interesting one, because for years in Bitcoin there has been all these different standards. And I think, as you had in that thread, and it's a famous XKCD, it's this idea of, oh look, there's all these competing standards, let me make a new one to unify them all. And then the end frame is, oh, now there's 15 competing standards instead of 14. And so obviously you're very self-aware in posting that. So do you want to give us a bit of the historical context? What were some of the attempts that have come in the past in Bitcoin's history?
So in the context of /pay, like what I'll say about the XKCD comic and really all popular memes is that I'm learning more and more that popular memes are basically like a great place for disruption. People get really comfortable with like a simplified idea and they kind of stop exploring and researching the idea, but it's really incomplete most of the time. It's just a shorthand for an idea. And XKCD, I've really learned, is kind of like, it's a great place, that comic, I mean, is a great place to actually kind of disrupt and show how people are wrong about the way they look at that comic. Yes, it is, kind of a meme or a joke to like always make a new standard, to always make a new tech that just replaces the old tech in a slightly different way or compiles it. But that's actually how tech works. Like, if you want to evolve protocols, evolve standards, evolve technology, you're basically just compressing what existed before into something that, compiles it all into something more useful and more convenient. And so making a standard of all the standards is, in my opinion, while a risky and hard thing to do, it's what we're supposed to be doing in most of the time when it comes to technology and protocols. And so /tags is basically, as I mentioned, a way of using key pairs to identify digital things. It could be a person, it could be a website, it could be a domain, it could be an API endpoint, whatever. It could be a movie, it could be a file, any kind of thing that could be addressable in a network. And we kind of are showing all these different use cases of how you can apply this to network and Bitcoin use cases. So the /pay example is basically showing that, in Bitcoin, we've had all these progressing new standards for payments. Like, we started with just, we actually probably started with IP addresses way back at the beginning. And then that stopped being used very early on. And we had the pub keys that people use for payments, the legacy ones that start with the number 1. And we had multi-sig that starts with the number 3. And most nodes will support that. But then we started adding more soft fork, payment options like SegWit and legacy SegWit versus native SegWit, which is the one that starts with a B. And then we have now Taproot addresses that are coming, which are the BC1M, I believe. And so just Bitcoin on the base layer itself has all these separate ways of paying, and then you even have separate standards for like expressing these as QR codes, paynims, etc. And so you have all these different ways of receiving and sending Bitcoin. And now Lightning is starting to have the same problem. We have like the Lightning Bolt 11 spec, which is how most people would create an invoice on Lightning. But then now we have LNURL as a new way of coordinating a payment. And we have now arguments about Lightning Labs' standard of AMP versus the proposed standard from Blockstream of Bolt 12, the offers spec. And so this is beginning. Oh, and we also have another one worth mentioning is PTLC channels, which are going to be incompatible, as far as I know, with HTLC channels. And so a lot of people think that the Lightning, there is the Lightning network. And I think that's a big misconception. I don't think that's how Lightning works. I think Lightning is a method of stringing channels of Bitcoin transactions together. And whether or not somebody is compatible with your method and all of the ways that you kind of incorporate routing into that method is just whether they're in your Lightning network or not. And I think that there already are multiple Lightning networks. There will be many Lightning networks, and there will be some Lightning networks that are compatible and some that are not. And whether they're compatible and whether they route together is basically whether your node supports this kind of multi-layered, multi-network routing to be able to abstract these ideas. And so if you take all these payment problems on the base chain, the payment problems on Lightning, and then you also think about how Lightning is now going to be technically more than one network, you've got all this stuff of kind of that becomes not interoperable. And so /pay was a way to show that if you just abstract all of this away to just one pub key, that you can use that pub key as an anchor into, well, what we use in /pay is a DHT. And so basically you just have a file that you can find within a network, sort of like you would find in BitTorrent. And there's a whole cryptographic way of handling this and way of finding this file, in a reliable way. And you can just tell people which payment methods that you support. And this way, when two peers using this method want to pay each other or create an invoice or create an address, on the fly, they can basically look at their payment preferences, which payment methods they support, and choose and match them programmatically, automatically in the background. So this way, the user experience in an application would become, I show you a QR code, you scan it, and then automatically we're already negotiating on how we're going to pay each other, and you just say how much you want to pay, and then your own servers or applications will handle this and just complete the payment, both to both parties' preferences. So SlashPay is just a way of taking all of that complexity and making it interoperable on a new standard that is kind of abstracted above everything.
Right. And so first question that comes to my mind is, now I'm sort of thinking back through Bitcoin and Lightning examples. So as an example, there is, say, version checking in Bitcoin. So they'll sort of say, oh, do you speak this? Oh, I speak that. And so especially in the Lightning Network, I think they will have this where it's like a feature bit or a version bit to sort of say, oh, yes, I speak this language and you speak that language. Now, of course, as you said, even there are differences there, right? So you have LNURL, you have Bolt 12, you have like all these different ideas. You have Bolt 11, the standard invoice. And even in the Bitcoin on-chain world, we've got PayJoin and like BIP78 versus, so there's all these different aspects of it. So then the question that I'm asking is, how do we prioritize those different methods? Like, is it that, let's say you and I, we both have our slash tags. Do you set a priority order so that when I reach out to you, I can look, okay, this is John's priority order. He would prefer Lightning, but if you can't get that, he would like a Paynim or he would like some other thing.
That's exactly how it works. Basically, it's like even LNURL, like LNURL auth, for example, it has support in its protocol for a fallback. So basically, if that person is scanning the QR code and they don't support LNURL authentication, you can have a fallback for a different type of authentication right inside the same QR. Well, we're taking that kind of idea and like intentionally putting it to a protocol of basically where you would rank. You basically dynamically every time somebody checked, and this means that you could hot swap out which payment methods you support. You could have you could have multiple LN nodes and take one offline and swap it with another. Like it's all dynamic because all they're using is your kind of top level pub key, and they're using that to contact you and see what you currently support. And so you'd be able to basically say, here are all the payment methods I support. Here is the order of preference in which I support them, and then basically you show me yours, I show you mine, and we match. And if we don't match, we can't pay each other, and if we do match, we choose the highest order preference. And this is basically a way to kind of hopefully solve this problem in a way that allows all of these different technologies and payment methods to actually compete in the market.
Excellent. And so that brings up that question then, is there some kind of online requirement, right? So like in the Lightning Network, it's seen like you need to be online to be able to take a payment because you're signing a message and so on. So how would that work in the context of, let's say, a mobile user if they're not online at the time? Is it calling back to the DHT as you're saying, or how does that part work?
Sure. So this is kind of getting into the whole thing isn't fully complete yet. Basically, we have a very early stage version of SlashPay working, and there are going to be a number of problems to solve and a number of user experience problems to kind of design for, and we're going to be tackling those problems within our application. So we're basically trying to say that we not only will say this is how you could do it, we will also show you how you could apply these methods in our own applications, so you can either copy them or improve upon them. But as far as what you're saying, yes, it is very much similar problem. Like you have Lightning, and you pretty much have to be online to be able to receive a payment. There are some kind of like hacks that have been created to kind of mitigate that requirement. But in the end, like if you want it to be full service and have the full user experience of all of this kind of customization and automation, being online is a requirement. There are certain payment methods that you might be able to handle them in an offline way, or even outsource the handling of them in a kind of trustless way. But depending on each payment type will depend on how much you can actually do that or not. Like for example, if I'm getting paid to an XPub, then you know that you can generate a number of keys programmatically out of that XPub, and that's one way you could handle this kind of situation. But if I'm paying like a raw Lightning invoice, it needs to be online, right? Like even the DHT, you also has to be online, but now you also have to have your node online to generate that invoice. And so depending on the payment method, will depend on whether or not that payment method is available when you're trying to pay over SlashPay. So it could be something like where if my node is offline or my wallet is not open at the moment, then you might see different payment options. And the idea, I guess, is for all the payment options that would require a third party, to basically make the third-party services that handle this as trustlessly as possible, and then even when it can't be done in a trustless way, to have payment services, like payment processors or custodial temporary custodians and things like this. In the end, we can't like deny physics, and so there are going to be certain limitations to, like, if you're not there to pay, then I can't pay you, and that's just a physics problem in the end, and we can't make magic. And so I think that there's a lot we can handle, much more than we do currently, but I don't think it will ever be perfect. It's going to be a moving target, really.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the benchmark here isn't perfection, but just at a high level, what happens if there is a payment failure? So as an example, let's say, I scan your /pay and the first priority is Lightning, and then let's say, I try to execute a Lightning payment, but that Lightning payment fails because maybe my node couldn't find the route or something like that. How would that work then?
Well, it would be pretty much the same. The same as if your payment fails using Lightning. You either make a new attempt, and Lightning right now is not very reliable. I mean, many wallets that I try, many payments that I try to make fail. Some of them fail and have errors, and I don't even understand why they failed. Some of them, they say payment in transit, and then 2 minutes pass, and I don't really know if it got paid or not. And you kind of have to close the wallet and refresh it. There's still a lot of gaps to fill in the user experience and in the technology. So I would say it will do just as good a job as your Lightning node could, except now you would have other fallback methods in addition to it. And this is a good segue to bring up that another problem that we're looking at solving at the moment is removing the